Hey everybody, good day. Now that this is officially just a vlog, and I've established well that I'm not really trying to say anything. I'm just trying to say how I think very authentically. So I wasn't going to release this capture I did because I kind of pick apart two gentlemen debating or having a conversation, let's say, about their own very sort of unique theories of everything. And all of my associated thoughts don't really weigh in very deeply on their content. It was more about the idea of having a debate about a theory of everything, and where you pick a winner, is kind of what caught my attention in this conversation. Yesterday's vlog, or the day before, I said my favorite tweet ever was this one I did to Yosha Bach over defining consciousness. I just made a new tweet that's my favorite. And I pinned it, and I'm hoping to leave it there forever. And I was the 42nd ever viewer of it. I like that number. So, important preface for everything I'm about to say in the attached segment that I wasn't going to release but now will release, is this. This is authentically how I think about shit. So, Curtis's Wisdom TLDRs. A random collection of stuff that isn't my idea, just my own sort of unique flavor of compression. Item 1. Stop assigning any value to not looking like a fool. If outward consensus is that you are a fool rather than a sage, you are likely growing inwardly at a greater rate. Item 2. Truth equals the harmony of all perceptions. The number of unique perceptions harmonized directly correlates to the fidelity of a truth described. Item 3. Ideas are like pimples. Any effort spent credit-seeking for one being your own is entirely wasted. Your idea can never be the pimple. At best, it can only be the thinnest layer of the outer dome. I know, yuck. Item 4. No one is right. See item 2 above. Again, I like 42, and I love that little thing I did there. Okay, I think that's enough said. I will now append all that I said. I think this was Monday or last week or something. Thanks, everybody. Well, hey, everybody, good day. Welcome to another episode of State Copy Podcast. Just going to be a solo show today, and the agenda will be I'm going to go through many thoughts that occurred while reviewing, it looks like 5 videos over the last few days. This is the data that really stood out to me and kind of triggered about the most like notable thought. This is going to be a regular episode of my show that I'll do. I think it's really interesting to kind of join in on these conversations that happen. We can all do this. You can watch, for instance, this episode of Dr. Brian Keating with Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram, and you can just jot down a time stamp of something one of them said, and then you can elaborate. It's almost like you participate in the conversation. Uninvited. But for purposes of state capture or really effectively jotting down how you think about things, I find this incredibly useful. So I invite any who would listen to my rambling to sit down, watch these conversations and lectures that I will point out and comment on, and jot down notes of your own thoughts. Record it, share it. It's wonderful. And I think later it will be very useful to AGI to model out your consciousness. Okay. So, one quick piece of housekeeping. It's fall break. I got my kiddo with me, and because of an incident with their mom over some shoes that were very expensive and left at an Airbnb, there's no screens for 2 weeks. So there may be an interruption during this, but I hope you'll just find that wonderful as I do. So, okay. Let's see. First, let's talk about this one. So the first video was Dr. Jeff Beck on the Bayesian brain. Machine learning on the Machine Learning Street Talk channel, which, I forgot to subscribe to. I will subscribe to that. I found this to be an awesome conversation. I've been working a ton on training large language models using transformers to train on raw plain text audio transcription, like of this thing I'm doing now. Feed that in, train it. So I'm real familiar with a lot of the subject matter of this conversation, and I'm really interested in I think it was in the optimization segment, if you want to just skip to it, where they talk about transformers. I really liked this guy's framing of transformers as basically just being group of agents, and this is a really powerful methodology for training AI that has suddenly emerged, where you set up all these agents and you get them to collaborate on an answer. And it seems like transformers and maybe this low rank adaptation that I've been using are basically kind of like neurons inside the neural net as it's defined, all sort of agreeing to an idea together, sort of collaborating on it. And that's what's setting the weights of the model. I may have that wrong, but I think that's how it works. I am a polymath. I'm curious about everything, so I look at it all. I look at all of it, at least a little bit. Some things I look at a lot of it. And just depending on interest and my own sort of ability or interest. This means I'm really not looking to specialize on any one place. I want to know as much about computing as I do philosophy, well, not as much. I want to have a general framework of understanding all things. That's all I really care about. I'm not really focused at all on mastery. So that was a lot said. Big tangent. In this conversation, I'm really interested. Let's see, notes I wrote down for it. Jeff Beck conversation on the Bayesian brain. I found myself rewinding a bit on the philosophy of mind segment. How do I think? How do I model reality in real time? I think a lot about this. Very, very productive thing to think about, I think. Like how do you actually, what governs your actions in real time? How does that work? And computer science and thinking about it through a lens of cognitive agency as like a Dr. Jeff Beck or Yosha Bach might understand those things is incredibly useful. If you want to like act with your own free will. I mean, in real time, a lot of what we're doing is all kind of automated response to triggers happening around us. And if you start listening to these cats, they will teach you how to kind of give yourself a mechanism for doing refactoring that you want to do. I think today I'm not going to get so pissed off when I get cut off in traffic. Also, I would say the other really useful lens to use for that is philosophy, the classics. I think I learned you could do this through study of Stoicism. Stoicism then took me to like the Jeff Becks and Yosha Bachs, and then sort of reconciling what both are saying about how my mind works. Really cool. Let's see. I rewound and focused on the mediation segment and the final 30-bit or so that I believe touched on simulation, God, etc. I was a bit distracted, but I plan to go back on this. I spent a good deal on time training plain text, unformatted audio transcription using transformer models, deeply interested on the potential of this Bayesian work of Jeff Beck, and I will plan to monitor it closely for making my training efforts more efficient. Also really enjoyed the framing the doctor uses of transformers essentially being a group of minds or agents, systems, which is what I believe this whole universe I'm writing into be in. I think we're a group of agents. I think we're a whole bunch of different perspectives of a shared state, and we're all agreeing to it. And that's how the thing grows. Or I'm wrong about that. That's how I'm framing it today, though. Let's see. Okay, that was that one. I'll link it in the show notes, and those are some thoughts on it. Next, really cool set of videos that just popped into my YouTube algo. I've just come across 2 videos on Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno and his tragic quest to unite all religions. I think that was, what's his name? I got it here. That was Agrippa's diary. This guy's a modern day mystic. He's reconciling all the old texts, all the old religions. Obviously a sage. All kinds of useful stuff you can get on this dude's channel. This Giordano Bruno, oh man. It's wild to think, I mean, through one lens, I could view it as, in the sort of the materialist view of how like this video falls into my lap today, because I listen to all of them and give them equal weight as I consider them. The sort of academic left brain would probably say that is the YouTube algo delivering exactly what I want to me at the moment. And they would explain it all away in how the YouTube model works. But then the right brain, the one that's kind of in touch with, let's say, a more artistic view, and how much I'm a reflection of outside self. I like to think of it almost through like a lens of how folks in that camp would describe sort of law of attraction. Law of attraction and the YouTube algorithm are both basically the same thing. The YouTube algo is paying attention to what information I will click on, and it's suggesting more things like that. So you've got Google working hard on AI to understand me based on my viewing habits and presenting me with Jeff Beck's conversation on the Bayesian brain, followed closely by this lecture on Agrippa's diary of Giordano Bruno and his tragic quest to unite all religions. That's the thing I've been trying to do. I think it's incredibly useful to start looking at all the religions just as manuals for finding authentic, grateful joy, and then just sort of harmonizing them. I think that's what this guy does, and he describes as universal intelligence. Fascinating. Totally simpatico. I'm going to go read a ton on this guy now. Yeah, let me, I think I even wrote some notes from this. So as I was watching it, and I watch these start to finish, and I rewind bits to try and make sure that it fits. I'm really trying to reconcile this stuff against each other. Let's see, this morning at 9:13 a.m., I linked the video, the first one I mentioned. I said, this guy understood state optimization, and he's a polymath. He's clearly got perception mechanics figured out. Oh, and perception weaving. That's what I think somebody who's trying to like harmonize all the Western faiths, Christianity, Muslim faith, Jewish faith, and Kabbalah, and critically, Buddhist and Hindu faiths. Like if you try and put those all together and weave them, I call it perception weaving. I think that they're all describing something similar, and just through a different it's like group of agents. It looks totally like Jeff Beck's group of agents and a transformer model to me. It looks like a whole bunch of different neurons describing a really important concept in their own unique way. And some neurons need to use Christianity, some need to use Buddhism to get to a place where they understand now self, outside self, and a loving understanding of those two things that just sort of there's a gap that is now between those two. Free will, all of it. And I can go on so many damn tangents on just that. Anyways, what else did I write? Oh, I said Goosebumps, and I linked this other one that was The Philosophy of Giordano Bruno. I'll put these in there. I said, need to figure out how a system for memory works. I've been working on something similar with like a memory mansion, I think they call it. This is basically those people that can remember like digits of pi, and there's no sort of repeating mechanism, so you have to purely memorize them. And these people that can like, I can go 3.14 and then I kind of stop because I don't really care to know it beyond that. But there are people that are like in the Guinness Book for being able to remember vast digits out. Now, if you're trying to refactor your mind to memorize things well, I think you're wise to study these people who have created sort of like algorithms for very efficiently recalling granularly data. This guy, Giordano, uses something with a wheel. I'm going to go learn how his works. I'm doing something where I do a walking meditation once a day, 2 miles out, 2 miles back along a straight path, and it's sort of marked by the telephone poles and the light poles along the way. Now, if I can attach a memory to those and then sequence them by walking by it back and forth, that's kind of the APIs for my own mind. I go to bed every night the subconscious processes that. And the hope is tomorrow I can more quickly reference some vital piece of information that I have set right next to one of those telephone poles or light poles along the way I walk back and forth every day. I suspect he's doing something similar with his wheel, but it might be more efficient than this one I'm building for myself. So I'm going to try and harmonize those two. I don't know. I think that's cool shit. I said, this is exactly the information I was looking for. I love how the YouTube algo and attraction are working together. Need to go do a deep dive on Bruno's universal soul, spirit, and intellect concepts. Have been struggling to define this myself. Check it out. Good stuff. Philosophy is cool. Okay. Now we get to Clash of the Titans. This video. Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram got together on Brian Keating's show. Dr. Brian Keating. Sorry, doctor. And sorry, other doctors. I'm sure you guys are no doubt doctors. On theories of everything. I find myself incredibly attracted to theories of everything because they're all trying to, through their own very unique lens, come up with answers for the most complicated questions. Now, critically, as I do this, I'm not going to let one of these guys tell me what to think. I want to be inspired and look for, as I described, ways to weave how they think with how I think personally. So I find a lot of what this community does to be a little dysfunctional. That there's so much focus put on like whose idea was it. Now, my model for this universe is that I'm just something fairly akin to a neuron or one model weight in the large language model. It seems so silly to me. It's asinine to think that I should strive for some sort of credit for being like the one who said something out loud. I can't even say anything out loud without somebody teaching me to speak. And these beautiful minds arguing over the deep. There is no wrong or right. There is just your flavor and my flavor. So a good deal of this conversation, it is Clash of the Titans. These are both guys who are convinced they have a theory of everything. And I'll go through the notes. I definitely align. Well, one of them is totally opaque to me. That's Eric's. Steven's, I think our two models are probably largely simpatico in a lot of ways. I mean, he's just way into the like proving out in practical and useful ways, where I think a lot of Bruno and Curtis are how we're coming up with much simpler ways, I think, of describing what the math and physics communities are working on. It's all just abstractions of thought, and it actually takes a hell of a lot of skill to frame them in simpler terms, and they must exist in simpler terms. None of your math is possible without the simple terms, birthing them, growing them like a seed grows a tree into another seed that goes and grows new trees. So many tangents I could go on that. Okay. So I'm going to come back to the very end of this. This will be a little bit lengthy because I had a lot of thoughts on this one. I am not optimized at all for the math stuff. And it was funny because Stephen Wolfram totally takes Eric to task. He's like, why are you needlessly complicating this in a language that only like this many % of the planet actually speaks? Why are you insisting it can only be described in that language? I agree. fun conversation I'll dig into now. But I want to say at the end of it, I'm going to take it to a very Alan Watts place. And I want to come back to a video that on Doug's Dharma. This is a guy I just came across. He's a PhD, also cognitive science or psychiatry, psychology. These folks who are so attached to their the recognition they get for their framing of things, really don't want to be disparaging about that. There's a tone you might pick up on, and it's because I take myself to task for doing it, but I think it's a very necessary mechanism of how we think rationally. There needs to be a phase where we think we're all doing this sort of ourselves, and our egos are like, it somehow matters whether Eric says something, or Brian says something, or Sabine says something first, and then how they vote internally on which one of them is more right or entirely right, and provably so, using their methodologies they've developed. Like, that is a very useful feature for progression of thought. I mean, it's how you get to much of this technology that I'm using right now. So I really don't disparage it, but I'm really not optimizing for that myself. I want to dismiss all of that kind of thought. I think the next progression is going, oh, this is a thing we're doing together. Credit is entirely useful. I mean, it's okay to issue credit to these wonderful people, like as for inspiring a useful way of thinking about things. It's okay to give it, but craving it or weighing your own worth and value on whether you got a Nobel Prize or not is just, I think, well, you're basically taking happiness and you're putting it outside yourself, and you're saying, I can never have that until all these other people agree. And that's a mistake. I'm confident that's a mistake long term. But it's very useful if you want to suffer in that way. I don't need any of these people to tell me how I think is valid. I have validated it myself, like a mathematical proof. It's a philosophical proof that just makes perfect sense. It's, I think, very akin to this Giordano Bruno's universal intelligence. I mean, you can basically look at all things and weave them together in a way to where you can prove them for yourself, that they fit properly. And so Eric Weinstein will probably never see this. And if he does, probably won't make it 10 seconds into my thoughts. That's fine. But I am grateful that he had this conversation with Stephen Wolfram, and that Brian Keating moderated it, because it inspired all kinds of really cool thought for me. Thanks, dude. I'm grateful. And I disagree with your whole framing that there can be right or wrong, or that you get any of your thought is even possible without Einstein's thought. I'll get to that. Being wrong. Okay. So I'm going to come back to a lot of sort of philosophical and Buddhist Alan Wattsy conclusion at the end of this. All right. So let's see. Yesterday at 5:20 p.m., I wrote, all right, I absolutely love Wolfram's oh, hang on, I'm skipping ahead. Where did this start? These might be unordered. I just jot these down as I'm watching these. I said, all right, I absolutely love Wolfram's comment in the video at about the 41:30 or 41:42 mark. I think it was beautifully said. Walking something down into a simple description is almost much harder than having a thought occur to you. Yeah. you can have a brilliant idea, but there's so much work involved in actually sort of like taking a theory and then breaking it out into a way that it's testable and sort of reinforcing it. And then from an engineer, and then engineering a way to leverage it to do some task or calculation. That oftentimes needs to be a really broad collaboration with other neurons or humans. And so I think Stephen Wolfram is very wise as he's saying to Eric there, look, man, you should be able to describe this, all of your stuff. Like it's, to a second grader. Not a second grader. Let's say your average 25-year-old human and 35-year-old human. I like this. 5-year-old, 15-year-old, 25-year-old, so on. Pick your interval. You need to be able to describe it out so that that collaboration can occur. And if you just, if you say, I mean, Stephen Wolfram rightly calls out that most of the language that Eric Weinstein uses in reference to his theory of geometric unity is you need graduate level mathematics understanding, probably at some Ivy League college, and that's just such a small bucket of humans. And you're never going to get anywhere with what you're doing unless you can figure out a way to communicate it out. And intellectually, that's not you dumbing it down. That's you translating your own thought. And if you, it's sort of, for all of us out here who are optimizing for other things, you look extremely arrogant to us for you when you go, oh, these are easy ideas. No, I don't want to spend any of the time you spent figuring out half that shit you called out in your book. I'm looking at a whole bunch of also big, important things, I think, and I'm not that interested in the mathematical methodology you use to get to, I think, a very similar place. Now, I hope that doesn't come across as arrogant. I think Stephen has a point. And apologies to Stephen Wolfram if I mischaracterized that or framed that in a way that wasn't true to how you view it. But that's how I interpreted it at this 41:30 mark. Oh, got kind of stoned, I think. I think I was about 18 minutes in. So a lot of the notes I'm taking down, now I'm not at all, I'm fully like 24 hours out of that now. Not 24, I'm 12-ish hours out of that now. Light hit of sativa as I'm absorbing this conversation and jotting down notes. So that flavors such a beautiful way how things occur to you in the conversation. Important disclaimer. All right. So I said, should do a dumbed down version of this app as a state copy episode. So this is when it occurred to me to do all this is stoned watching these two talk. And that's kind of how the entire structure for this unscripted stream of consciousness that you're witnessing here from me, like it all came from that. It was inspired. Like I sat down there, I wrote down these things occur to me, and then I sleep on it. And then from a sober way, I look at it. I think that is an extraordinarily valuable unlock in creativity and developing thought that I would highly recommend. But please adhere to all clearly stated disclaimers and disclosures in the terms and conditions of State Copy Podcast. All right. At the 47-minute mark, Eric actually, what Steve is describing, I think actually is doing what Steve is describing in that analogy he uses. Without knowing any of the examples, I know what he is describing. Oh, yeah, this is where... So at the 47-minute mark, Eric basically, I think, is trying to describe thinking outside the box. He basically says, basically having to define a new, in compute terms, I'd think of this as saying, while I'm trying to describe something, I realize I don't have the right tools or framework, so I'd have to go write a new library that it tackles it from an outside dimension. Like it, this is just saying sometimes when you work on something, you don't have the right tools, so you have to go make a new tool or a new lens of which to view a problem from. You have to construct a new position in the room to look at something from, and then sort of define it really well, how it works, and then you reference it. You go back to the other thing you were doing and you reference it. I think that's what he's doing, but then he does it through this, like he cites all of these mathematical, like complex, for people that really want to optimize for math, graduate level understanding of those things. And he just wants to say what I just said. It's something outside the box. I think Eric Weinstein would have way better luck and would get way less friction and opposition if he could start describing things the way the rest of us all talk, and not sort of assuming that it's realistic or pragmatic to assume that all of us will adopt his same appreciation for the way he thinks is in math. That's not how most of us think. And it's sort of arrogant to assume that we would all formulate that same interest and dedicate the time associated that he has. So his theory will start and end with him unless he can learn to do that. And I think Stephen Wolfram is giving him some sage advice. Quick disclaimer, though, I found it incredibly useful to follow this Eric Weinstein just to try and start building a context for understanding what all these people are arguing about over here in the physics community, string theory versus other, sort of the evolution of it, how modern science and academia and research and how all of these things function together. I actually learned a shit ton from this Eric guy. But as far as how the universe works fundamentally, no. Geometric unity, when he starts talking about S2, U2, F4, nobody talks that way, dude. You can't stop it. Break it down into the way everyone else talks. And also, I would say there's a thing you do where I think it's very useful in your community to have this expectation that everybody sort of catch up with how I think. But it feels a lot like kind of an arrogant fuck. You know, like from us watching you on Rogan talk or whatever. This is why I think you have all of this pushback, is you're basically saying you almost catch up with my graduate level math. It's like somebody from a foreign language coming to your country and saying, I have the answers to everything. You must learn my language. No, learn my language and communicate it in a way we can all understand clearly. If you're as smart as you say you are, you should be able to do that. Lots of us do that all the time for very complex things that are outside your wheelhouse. I don't want that to sound shitty. I don't mean it shitty. I'm very grateful for everything I've gotten from that dude and the other people he's talked to that I've those conversations. Thanks. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, while I was high, I was thinking, it leaves me to wonder if he's even aware he's doing it. Joy emoticon. And I wonder how that got hard-coded into the way he talks. Is it desire to garner outside approval from within that very unintelligible crowd who seem absolutely obsessed with which neuron gets to say this was all their idea? I think it's cute. I love you guys for doing it, but I'm very grateful that I have evolved a different understanding of how to think about these things and work and contribute. Try this. It's great. Okay. Let's see. At the 1 hour, 22 minute mark, Einstein was wrong. I said, there is no wrong. Everything is context for finding something that works better. Also, why does this fit here? Yeah, I mean, at this point of the 1 hour, 22 minute mark of this video, Brian Keating, I think this is where he kicked ass as a moderator. He brought two smarty pants dudes together to argue their ideas. And I've watched Stephen Wolfram interviewed independently. I'm going to go back and watch a bunch of his other stuff. I actually think a ton of his work on sort of constructing the seed for how all of this complexity grows really aligns well with, I think, a ton of what I see in ancient hermetics and philosophy. A lot of this, I think, is right in that wheelhouse. And I didn't realize that he thought that way. I got a kick out of how he was not passive in defending his approach. And I think at the end of it, you were just, it was very clear when Dr. Brian said, you know, the community at large doesn't like these types of conversations and pushes back against them because they want to know how do you falsify it? They want to know peer review. They want to know all these things. And I thought the way Stephen Wolfram responded to that question was like there's no razzle dazzle. He was just like, okay, yeah, I kind of see why they, peer review, cool, we'd like it, but nobody's reviewing our stuff. They're sort of prejudging. And he actually, I think in a quantitative way, he said what is useful peer review, and I really agree with it, that hey, go to this mark, this page of the paper, this specific point, here's where I steel man what you're saying, and this is where I offer an outside critique. That's the sort of peer review that's useful. Just reading the header and then dismissing it is not at all helpful. That's not peer review. It's not helpful. I thought that was very cogent, cohesive. Like that was the right framing for how Dr. Brian framed, pushback from the community. And I thought how he said, hey, what we're building with Wolfram Alpha and the community that he's working with. And there's a whole community of people because it's open and it's well described so that a lot of people can contribute on it. And he's saying what I see from that community is shit, I lost train of thought. Oh, not what I see. I got it back. We're building a framework. It's not like I'm not positing a complete tested theory yet. We're building a framework, a new framework for how to think about a thing. And he used an analogy to like calculus. It's not a theory. You're building a whole framework and a system that's going to take a whole bunch of collaboration to build it. And he laid out a whole bunch of the things that they are pretty confident they're going to be able to test really soon. And he did it in a very specific, like material way, where he said, like, this one, I think we're going to be able to do this. Here's some stretch goals that might be way out there, but boy, it'd be fun to think about. It was cool. But then when it was Eric's turn to talk, he did the S2, U2, V2 thing. I think what Eric's getting at is he's mathematically created a proof that he thinks can be used to let you do something like fold space, or not fold space, re-envision the ruler that defines the space between two objects in space-time. So rather than settling for like the limitations that Einstein gave us with theory of relativity and light speed and whatnot, he's saying, well, what we can do is we can redefine the scale between two objects and how we transverse them. That he's just saying that there's basically a way you can fit everything Einstein thought into something that's just sort of got a lot more to it, that would enable things like intergalactic or interstellar travel within the human lifespan, like going to the store to get a whatever. That stuff's cool. That's what drew me to his work. But it, like, he spends a lot of time framing why that would be useful. He immediately shifts to why he's frustrated that that kind of work can't get traction, and that frustration he's experiencing I found very illuminating, for just understanding the dysfunction and why the math and physics community hasn't given us a lot since like the 70s. In my lifetime, I can't think of anything like this. Is all everything that's cool that has happened, technologically speaking, came from the engineering side of modern compute and all of that. They haven't really given us anything that's equivalent to, there's actually cool stuff happening with fusion, but not mature yet. But I think that what's needed is for him to disassociate ego. I think he should spend a whole bunch of time studying sort of how we think, what the universe is through the lens of humans and our interconnect. A thing that I just feel like is totally missing from these theories of everything guys, these that are like the the movie theory of everything. And when I see Weinstein on Rogan, we're looking for explanations for, why am I here? What is this for? How does it work? And how is your math going to explain the feeling of love? The like human things that are human relatable, we all operate in the context of our emotion and our day-to-day lives. How does your math fit into that? That's what you should be trying to describe if you want to get collaboration from the outside and you want something other than pushback. Or I'm wrong about that. Sorry. That's my take. Let's see. At the 1 hour, 42 minute mark, Eric is on a tear about the simulation and on God, better look out when we understand our source code. I think we're all God trying to figure God out. If you look back at stuff outside of your math, there's all kinds of really clear guidance and that will take you to figuring that out. You just got to be open-minded and look outside of your wheelhouse. I wrote segmented conscious perceptions purposefully mixed up such that we can argue amongst ourselves about what we are so as to grow a more nuanced understanding of our unsegmented self. I think that's what we are. I think this does largely exist in mind. Objective reality, I think, is how they were just talking about that on the Dr. Jeff Beck's Bayesian conversation, the Bayesian brain, like materialist versus objective. I forget all these terms these folks use. Anyways. Yeah, I think this is all just slivers of God working together for what they all are as a connected entity. Think we're growing that. It's like you trigger it, you kick it off, and it's not a simulation is not an empty notion. It all exists to define love. That's a big thought. Okay, so my theory of everything, if I were going to build a formula like a Steve Wolfram would, I would say I wouldn't sort of pompously say it was any of my idea. I would just go look at all of the thought that's gone into this problem, and I'd find really simple, clear depictions that are well defined, like a Taiji 2. It's a two-dimensional cross-section of, like, I picture a three-dimensional sphere. And what I'd say is the basic recipe for a cognitive agency like my own is you have to create two separate perceptions, and you have to get them arguing amongst each other. This is how, like, my eyeballs perceive depth, is my mind harmonizes the input it's getting from each eyeball. And we do this with everything. We actually do it with how we think. A lot of it is left brain and right brain arguing with each other. That's how modern cognitive science looks at it. But I think that's a really clumsy way to divide up how the machine code. But essentially, you have to take at least more. If one perception gives you two-dimensional that's not even right. There's so much complexity in this, but I would say, you have static perception when there's only one cognitive agency at work. So you gotta couple two or more together. And this is where a group of agents and transformers and all that takes place. So Taiji 2 is a representation of sort of those warring perceptions in a self. And then I picture, like, I think a lot of, like, the mathematics that Eric's geometric unity, that what he's looking at is just like a small sliver of basically two perceptions in the place where this exists as thought or is describable in code. as Stephen Wolfram describes, are bickering with each other. So then you have this protocol called love. Now, love is aware of reconcile cause and effect perfectly. It sees how all of this is just a thing that is a connected thing, and everything is a reaction to an action, and vice versa. Not vice versa. They both exist at the same time. The cause can't exist without the effect. The effect can't exist without the cause. The human is a certain way because of all of the outside stimulus from the time they were an infant all the way up. And love is like this protocol that binds those two perceptions around each other. And then the Taiji too, the inner globes, I think those are just, it's like a nested version of the same thing inside it. That same force that holds binds the two perceptions together exists inside, wrapping around an opposite, the white inside the black and the black inside the white. And it's wrapped around that same love binder protocol. And I think this just fans out perpetually in both directions of time, space, etc., and how a human thinks about it, and all the dimensions that go beyond how a human can think about it. That's how I would quickly summarize all that is today. It could change tomorrow as I listen to all these brilliant folks talk. All right. So I'll wrap up here. We're at almost an hour. It's a fun talk. I like this one. I'll finish up on the Buddhist image hides a secret, and on Doug's Dharma. I'll link this in the description. Here are the notes I wrote down about it. I said, wrap up on this video I just reconciled on Doug's Dharma. The Buddhist image hides a secret. With my local model that I think is probably pretty akin to Giordano Bruno's universal intelligence and a lot of Steve Wolfram stuff, I'd say the statue is a poetic or symbolic reference to what I refer to as the moment of authentic grateful joy. One I'll link also in the description. The last link will be where I describe my own moment of that. It's like the fucking greatest aha moment a cognitive agency can experience, where it all just snaps into focus. And then you get to have lots of them after that all the time. But the first one is critical. And I think this, the imagery of the Buddha with his hand touching the ground, if you listen to this whole 10 minutes and 50 seconds like I did, it's somebody experienced, I think, that, and then they tried to communicate it. And I think we get very caught up in a lot of the semantics of how that's communicated. And a lot of times we miss the meaning of what's there. I think that's where it becomes really useful to look at many of them and then harmonize them. That's how you can get to, oh, this is what they're all describing. And then you can use all of the incremental steps and demarcations and definition of terms. They all sort of start to rhyme with each other. So I said, let's see, for authentic grateful joy, one in which you can suddenly fully reconcile the causality of all things, and a moment so wonderful it suddenly justifies everything that came before and will come after for an individual cognitive agent. Link into the description to my first one, really deeply described the day after it occurred. I'd say all the delineations of pre and post enlightenment with regard to Buddha should only be used as points of reference for helping an outside like cognitive agent or another human understanding of a progression of thought that the Buddha we all know and love would see much as a connected progression. I don't think, like if Buddha were sitting here across from me and I asked him about this, I think he'd say, well, it's all the same thing. It's all connected. You can't take Bodhisattva out of the story. Like it wasn't all working to a place of enlightenment. Enlightenment is the connected story, start to finish, in all of its stages. So when I look at these things through a sort of Bruno universal intelligence lens, like a way where you're looking for everything to rhyme with each other, I think that's a useful way to think about it. And I could be wrong about that. I don't know. I'm just trying to put all this shit together like you all are. Critically, and this is a bodhisattva thing to say, don't take my word for it. Don't think what I think, and don't let Eric Weinstein or Brian Keating or Curtis Cobb tell you're like their idea is better than yours. Who the fuck are we? You know, like when I listen to these people talk, I'm grateful, I'm respectful, I'm humble about what I don't know, but I'm not interested in going and figuring out any of that silly math that Eric's so obsessed with. And there are so many other people that can describe it more clearly. Sorry, dude. And if you said, well, if Eric ever said, well, this guy's clearly wrong, fuck do I care? I live in me, not you. Myself is on this side. Let's see. I said, the ep should end on an Alan Watts note. Bodhisattva gonna totally listen to every view Steve, Curtis, Eric have to say with an open mind and heart. But he's not gonna let outside self tell him what to think the universe is. That has to be a thing self also thinks and loves. If I don't love the idea, it's not the reality I select for. Who's right is a silly thing to waste time on. Why do you need outside validation? Construct it as a mathematical proof where you can be like, oh, that new way you're suggesting I look at all of this and myself adds a cool flavor that I hadn't considered. Thank you. But just because I don't have the plaque on my wall, I'm never going to take what some disjointed, cockeyed U2, S2 plus V2, R2, D2. I'm just going to dismiss it like everyone else does. And if all of this stuff I'm saying just bounces off your ears, shit, I tried. And hopefully there was some little piece of it where you're like, but that does kind of rhyme with how I think about it. And this guy's take on it, this guy's flavor, makes mine sort of, drives my thought. That's all I'd like to do. And collecting all my thoughts and describing them well to a computer helps the computer put me back together. That's actually what I'm trying to do here. That's all well described in the disclaimers. I'm not trying to convince anybody of shit. I'm really just trying to state out loud how I think about everything so that it helps me feel with that proof that I'm working on for self. That might be very frustrating to that community that I don't give a shit about their approval. That's fine. You know? And I don't think they care that I'm not going, yes, you are right and I am wrong. I'm going to just couple myself to your notion of how all this works and go back to watching TikTok. No, that's just not in me. I can't do it. So I would say, why do you need, continuing my notes, I want to close this off right. Why do you need outside validation? I don't need you to validate my model. I know it to be accurate and complete. I have learned to operate alongside all of you in the same space-time and flourish. But I've reserved a part of my ego or self that is perfectly content to be the only cognitive agent who thinks what I think as a like cognitive agency. So I can survive and thrive in Eric and Doug and Jeff's shared state, thinking what I think and being quite content with that, not needing their approval. That's the bodhisattva thing. That's you build the model for the game of it all. And you don't let somebody come in and says you got to play by my. You can't drive your spaceship like that. I can drive my spaceship however the fuck I want. You can't stop me. I live, my reality exists here. And this is where I say, my model must rhyme with yours. That's good enough for me. And you can call this thing I'm doing voluntary sort of schizophrenia, but I would say it's a very healthy one. All right, everybody. It's been real. If you sat through all of this, I just think you're amazing. And I hope one of my crazy takes on these conversations is useful. But mostly I'm just trying to say what I think out loud. Hope you enjoyed. Take care, everybody.